She was dragged out of her husband's funeral with her baby in her arms, humiliated, homeless, and heartbroken. Everyone turned their backs on her until one stranger stepped forward. What happened next exposed a family's darkest secret and changed her life forever. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel as a sign of support. It was a gray Sunday morning in Maple Hill, a small town nestled in the foothills of North Carolina. Rain patted gently on the stained glass windows of St. Luke's Church as mourners gathered to say goodbye to Sergeant Thomas Grayson. A decorated war hero, Thomas had been killed during a rescue mission overseas. Inside the church, his wife, Emily Grayson, clutched their infant son, Noah, her face pale with grief. Emily sat in the front pew, surrounded by silence and judgment. Though Thomas had served his country with pride, his family, especially his older brother Curtis, had never approved of his marriage to Emily. She was from the wrong side of town, they said, a waitress from a diner, barely scraping by before Thomas fell in love with her. Curtis sat behind her, his jaw tight, his expensive black suit clashing with his icy demeanor. As the minister spoke of valor and sacrifice, Curtis exchanged glares with his mother, Marion Grayson. To them, Emily was never truly part of the family. They tolerated her presence for Thomas's sake, but now that he was gone, that tolerance had vanished. After the eulogy, Emily stood and walked to the casket, whispering a quiet goodbye as Noah whimpered in her arms. She turned to walk back to the pew, but found Curtis standing in her path. "Emily, you need to leave," he said, his voice low and sharp. "What?" she gasped, tightening her grip on Noah. "You're no longer family. This service is for Thomas and us, not you." The stunned congregation murmured, unsure of what was happening. "You can't be serious," Emily replied, her voice trembling. Curtis gestured, and two men from the Grayson Estates security staff walked down the aisle. Before Emily could react, they grabbed her by the arms, one holding her baby, the other escorting her out like a criminal. Gasps filled the church. No one stood up for her. Rain soaked her as she was shoved onto the wet pavement outside, her dress stained with mud, her baby crying in the cold. "You're not welcome here," Marion Grayson said, stepping outside under a black umbrella. "You were never good enough for my son." Emily stood there in shock, too numb to speak. The church doors closed behind them, muffling the sound of the organ. She had just buried the love of her life and been publicly humiliated in front of the entire town. Alone with her child, drenched and devastated, Emily had no idea what would come next. But someone had seen it all. And he wasn't just any man. He was watching from the last row in silence. His eyes narrowed not in judgment, but in concern. His name was Michael Whitaker, a self-made millionaire no one in Maple Hill really knew. Yet, Michael Whitaker didn't usually attend funerals. He was a private man, a former tech CEO who'd quietly retired to Maple Hill after selling his cybersecurity company for millions. He preferred staying off the radar. No press, no speeches, no flashy cars, just peace. But today, something pulled him to St. Luke's. He hadn't known Sergeant Thomas Grayson personally, but he respected anyone who gave their life for the country. Michael had quietly donated to veterans' causes for years, and when he saw the obituary in the local paper, he decided to pay his respects. What he hadn't expected was the scene that unfolded right before his eyes. From the back pew, partially hidden by the column, Michael watched as the grieving widow was forcibly removed from her husband's funeral. Her pale face, soaked by both rain and tears, haunted him. The baby's wail sliced through the somber air like a knife. No one helped her. Not the minister, not the guests, not even the neighbors who used to greet her with polite smiles at the grocery store. He felt something twist inside him. Anger, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition. He had seen that kind of cruelty before. His own mother had been treated like that after his father died. A working-class woman deemed not good enough for the Whitaker name. His grandparents had cut her off, and for years Michael watched her scrape and struggle to survive. That memory still lit a fire inside him. He stepped outside into the drizzle, pulling his umbrella low and watching as Emily sat on the church steps, trying to shield her baby with her thin black shawl. She didn't notice him, too consumed by the storm swirling inside her. Michael hesitated. Approaching her now with emotions raw and humiliation fresh might make things worse. He needed to wait, but he wouldn't walk away. Instead, he called his assistant. "Olivia," he said when she answered, "I need you to do something for me. Find everything you can on a woman named Emily Grayson. She just got thrown out of her husband's funeral. I want to know where she's staying, if she has a job, a support system, anything." "Sure thing," Olivia said without asking questions. She was used to Michael's sudden requests, many of which involved helping strangers. He hung up and watched as Emily finally stood, bouncing the baby gently to calm his cries. She began walking down the street, shoes soaked, dress clinging to her legs. Every step looked heavier than the last. Michael stepped into his car, a modest black sedan that blended in, and followed from a distance. He wasn't sure what he was going to do yet, but he knew one thing. No woman should be treated like that, especially not in her darkest hour. And if no one else in Maple Hill was willing to help her, he would. Emily trudged through Maple Hill's quiet streets, her heels clicking against the wet pavement with each unsteady step. The rain had soaked through her thin dress and left her baby's blanket damp, but she kept going, teeth clenched, arms wrapped protectively around Noah. Her eyes were stinging, not just from tears but from shame. Her heart pounded with humiliation. She kept seeing Curtis's face, his smirk as she was dragged out of the church like she didn't matter, like she had never been Thomas's wife, like she was a stain they were trying to wash away. Thomas's family had never accepted her. She knew that from day one, but she never thought they'd be so heartless. Thomas had begged her to give them a chance. "They'll come around," he'd said with a hopeful smile. But they never did. Now she had no home. The Grayson estate, where she had lived with Thomas, was locked up. Curtis had changed the security codes and warned her not to come back. She didn't have the money for a lawyer. Most of her belongings were still in the house. She headed to the only place she could think of, the old roadside motel on the edge of town. The sign buzzed dimly above the office. Maple Pines Lodge. It wasn't glamorous, but it had a roof and working heat. Inside, the clerk looked up at her with wide eyes. Her disheveled appearance made her look more like a runaway than a grieving widow. "I just need a room for the night," Emily said hoarsely. I'll pay you tomorrow. I swear. I just need somewhere warm for my baby." The clerk hesitated. "You don't have anything now?" She shook her head. He scratched his temple. "Look, I'm not supposed to do this, but I'll put you in room 12 for the night. But just one night, okay?" Emily nodded, nearly breaking down in relief. Thank you so much." The room was small, with yellowing walls and a heater that rattled when it ran, but it was safe. She curled up with Noah on the bed, wrapping him in her coat to keep him warm. She stared at the ceiling in the dark, thinking of Thomas, how he used to hum lullabies to Noah, how he'd promised to build a swing in the backyard, how he'd always said they'd be okay no matter what. "I don't know what to do," she whispered into the night. "I'm trying, but I don't know how to make it without you." Outside, across the parking lot, Michael Whitaker sat in his car, engine off, watching the motel lights flicker. Olivia had already texted him a brief background. Emily worked nights at the Waffle Spot Diner. No criminal history, no debts, no help. Michael tapped the steering wheel, then made a decision. He wasn't just going to help her survive. He was going to help her reclaim everything they'd stolen from her. Morning sunlight peeked through the worn curtains of room 12, casting soft light over Emily and baby Noah as they lay on the narrow motel bed. Her eyes fluttered open, heavy with exhaustion and the weight of uncertainty. She gently touched Noah's cheek, grateful that he had finally fallen asleep after crying much of the night. A knock on the door startled her. She wrapped Noah in the blanket, her heart thudding. For a moment, she feared Curtis had found her again. When she opened the door, a tall man in a gray coat stood with a warm but unreadable expression. He held 2 paper coffee cups in one hand and a brown bag in the other. "Emily Grayson?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yes. I'm Michael Whitaker. I was at your husband's funeral yesterday. I saw what happened." Her face immediately flushed with shame. I don't want pity. If you came here to tell me what everyone else is thinking..." "No," he said calmly. "I came here to help." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because no one else did. And because I've seen what happens when people turn their backs on someone who's already lost everything. He held out the coffee and bag. There's food in here. You and your son need it. Reluctantly, Emily took it. She stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. The motel room was modest and cold. Michael didn't comment. He sat on the small armchair while Emily held Noah close, feeding him with a bottle she'd prepared from a can of formula she had left over in her bag. I read up a little, Michael said. You worked at Waffle Spot, took care of Noah full time, and you and your husband lived at the Grayson estate until recently. Until they kicked me out, she said bitterly. They said I wasn't entitled to anything, not even a photo of Thomas. Did Thomas leave a will? She shook her head. He tried to draft one before his last deployment, but he didn't get the chance. Curtis claims the estate is all in his name now. Michael frowned. That's not how the law works, especially not in North Carolina. Spouses and children are protected, even if there's no will. Emily looked up, startled. Are you saying they can't just take everything? They can't, not legally, but they're counting on you not having the resources to fight them. She looked away, brushing a tear from her cheek. They're right. I don't. Michael leaned forward, his voice steady. That's why I'm here. I want to help you fight this. I'll pay for the best legal team in the state, give you a place to stay, and cover anything you and Noah need. Emily blinked, stunned. Why would you do that for someone you don't even know? Michael smiled faintly. Let's just say, someone once helped my mother when no one else would. I've never forgotten that, and I don't believe in letting good people get trampled. For the first time since the funeral, Emily felt something break through the grief. A flicker of hope. Okay, she said softly. Let's fight. By the end of the week, the Graysons got the shock of their lives. Curtis Grayson sat in his father's old office in the estate house, sipping bourbon when the doorbell rang. Marion, ever poised, opened it, expecting a delivery. Instead, a sharply dressed man in a navy suit handed her a thick envelope. Curtis Grayson? The man asked. Curtis stood up in the foyer. That's me. You've been served. Probate petition, custody motion, and an injunction against asset misappropriation. Good day. The man walked away as Curtis opened the envelope and read the documents. His face turned red. What is this nonsense? Marion asked. Emily, Curtis growled. She's fighting back. And not alone. Michael Whitaker had hired Janet Adler, one of the top family and estate attorneys in the state. Janet was known for tearing through trust funds and boardrooms with equal ease. Within 48 hours, she'd filed motions to freeze the Grayson estate, citing wrongful eviction of a lawful widow and unlawful control of community property. Emily sat beside Janet in her new apartment, a modest but clean two-bedroom unit in a gated complex owned by one of Michael's companies. Noah slept peacefully in a crib nearby. She's going to tear them apart, Michael said confidently as he poured Emily some tea. And this time, you won't be alone. Emily still couldn't believe it. In less than a week, she had gone from being homeless and humiliated to mounting a serious legal challenge against one of the wealthiest families in Maple Hill. I don't know what to say, she said, her voice cracking. You've done more for me than Thomas's own family ever did. Michael nodded. You don't owe me anything. But I do have one request. Emily looked up. Don't let them scare you into silence. People like the Graysons thrive on fear. They never expect someone to stand up to them. She nodded slowly. I won't. The case gained traction quickly. News of the church incident had already trickled out into the community, and now the legal filings made headlines in the local paper. Sympathy poured in from strangers. Mothers brought over toys for Noah. Veterans who served with Thomas reached out to say how much he loved Emily, how he'd always talked about protecting her no matter what. Curtis, furious, tried calling in favors to get the case thrown out, but the law was clear. Thomas had died intestate, and as his lawful wife, Emily had rights: custodial, financial, and emotional. Marion insisted the family fight back with everything they had, but Curtis had underestimated one key factor. Michael Whitaker wasn't just funding Emily's case. He was also quietly buying up shares in several companies the Graysons depended on. While they played defense, Michael was planning a much deeper checkmate. Emily stood tall through every court hearing, her confidence growing day by day. She wasn't the weak, helpless widow they tried to silence. She was a mother, a fighter, and now, a symbol of quiet resilience. It was a rainy Thursday morning when everything changed. Emily arrived at the courthouse with Noah bundled in her arms, his little blue hat askew as he snored softly against her shoulder. Michael met her at the steps, umbrella in hand. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." Inside, the probate hearing room was packed. Reporters, townsfolk, even a few veterans from Thomas's old unit had come. The Grayson sat across the room, stiff and irritated. Curtis wore his best suit, but his confidence was slipping. Marion sat beside him like a statue, her lips pursed so tight they nearly disappeared. Janet Adler stood confidently, papers in hand, and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we now present newly discovered documentation found in Sergeant Thomas Grayson's personal effects, specifically a video message recorded shortly before his final deployment." A collective gasp went through the room. Marion turned pale. Curtis leaned forward. Emily froze. "Play the video," the judge instructed. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as a projector displayed the image on a screen. There was Thomas, seated in a barracks room, in uniform. He looked tired but clear-eyed. "If you're seeing this," he began, "it means I didn't make it home. Emily, baby, I'm sorry. I hate leaving you like this. But if anything happens, I want everyone to know. You are my wife, my partner, and everything I built. I built for you and Noah. I never trusted my family with anything. Curtis doesn't care about anyone but himself. And my mother, well, you know how she is." Gasps echoed from the spectators. Marion's face turned a deeper shade of red. "I was working on the paperwork to leave it all to you. But if I didn't finish it, don't let them push you out. Fight, Em. Use this video. Prove what they already know. I love you. I always will." The video cut to black. Silence hung thick in the air. The judge cleared his throat, visibly moved. This evidence, in addition to the plaintiff's legal standing as Sergeant Grayson's widow, strongly supports her rightful claim to a substantial share of the estate, if not the entirety. Curtis shot to his feet. "That's a fake. She probably made that video herself." Michael stood calmly, then explained how it was authenticated by the Department of Defense, backed by metadata, timestamps, and witnesses in Thomas's unit, who confirmed he recorded it weeks before the mission. Curtis had no answer. The judge dismissed the Graysons' objections and granted a stay order on the estate until a full division of assets could be completed, prioritizing the widow and minor child. Emily's eyes welled with tears, not just because of the legal victory, but because she'd heard Thomas's voice again. And now the world knew what she already did. She had been his everything. Outside the courtroom, people clapped quietly. Some gave encouraging nods. One woman even hugged her. "I'm so proud of you," Michael said gently. Emily smiled for the first time in what felt like months. "I didn't think I had the strength." Michael shook his head. "You always had it. You just needed someone to remind you." Spring came early that year. The cherry blossoms around Maple Hill bloomed pink and full, a soft contrast to the icy memories of winter. Emily stood on the porch of her new home, modest, sunlit, and full of laughter. She rocked baby Noah in her arms as the breeze swept through the wind chimes she'd hung up herself. It was the first time in months that peace didn't feel like a stranger. Thanks to the court's ruling and Thomas's final message, Emily had been awarded full ownership of her share of the Grayson estate. Curtis and Marion fought it until the very end, dragging their feet through every legal channel, but their influence had finally cracked. The video had shattered their facade. Curtis was now under investigation for financial mismanagement of trust assets, and Michael's quiet acquisition of their company's board seats had pushed him out entirely. Emily never set foot in the Grayson estate again. She didn't want the mansion or the ghosts that came with it. Instead, she sold her share and used the funds to build something fresh, a life for Noah rooted in dignity, not bitterness. She enrolled in college part-time, aiming for a degree in early childhood development, and with Michael's help, she also launched a small nonprofit called Thomas's House, a transitional housing program for single parents fleeing domestic or financial hardship. Room 12 at Maple Pines Lodge had inspired her. She wanted others to have somewhere to go when the world turned cold. Michael visited often, usually with groceries or flowers. But more than that, he brought warmth, guidance, and patience. He never pushed her, never treated her like a project, just a person, someone worth believing in. One afternoon, he sat across from her at the little kitchen table, watching Noah crawl toward a stuffed bear. "You know," he said, sipping his coffee, "you could have given up at any point. No one would have blamed you." Emily smiled faintly. "I almost did. More than once. But then I'd hear Thomas's voice in my head, telling me to fight, and then I heard yours." Michael leaned back, smiling. "I think you saved yourself, Emily." Maybe he was right. Later that evening, Emily placed a photo of Thomas on the mantle. She'd added one of Noah next to it, and another, a newer one, of her, Noah, and Michael standing together at the ribbon cutting of Thomas's house. She kissed her finger and touched it to Thomas's smile. "We're okay," she whispered. "I kept my promise." Noah gurgled from the couch, waving his little hands. Emily scooped him up, breathing in the scent of baby lotion and hope. The past had scarred her, but it hadn't broken her. And with each step forward, she rewrote the story, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a mother, a builder of second chances. The girl who had once been dragged out of a church now stood tall, with a legacy built not on grief, but on strength and love. Emily's journey from heartbreak to healing is a powerful reminder that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet resilience and the courage to keep going when everything falls apart. She was dragged out of a church in shame, but rose with dignity, not only reclaiming what was rightfully hers, but also creating a future for others in need. Never underestimate the strength of someone fighting for their child, or the power of standing up for what's right. If Emily's story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And remember, sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change everything.